podcast on real relationships. My name is Sophie Passon, and I am a relationship expert, international speaker, and best-selling author of a book, Your Other Half. I decided to start this podcast because, in my opinion, relationships are currently not being portrayed as what they really are. Whether you're watching the news, TV, social media, the perception given to people is wrong, and my aim is to talk about what happens in the real world, talk about real stories, and listen to what real people think, do, or go through, as opposed to creating expectations of something that actually doesn't exist. I may not agree with everything that is said by my guests, but it is their chance to express their opinions and their stories. So here today we have Kari Roberts, and we're going to talk about what it's like to have stepkids. Hi, Kari.
Hi, Sophie.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, really good.
So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Yes, I am. Currently, I'm sort of an independent emotional strength coach and also a parenting specialist. I worked for local authority for sort of over 12 years, and my roles were working with young people, providing support, emotional support, and also support around, drugs and alcohol. Then I sort of started thinking about parents and the support that parents had and where could they go to get the support, because they play such a big part in, children's lives, basically. So,
definitely.
I then started working as a parenting specialist and worked with sort of families, children of all ages. Part of my role was to develop programs, and I was part of a cohort that wrote Parents Emotional First Aid, that Solent Health run. And because, a lot of parenting support is very practical, but actually what we found was missing was that emotional impact. And looking at emotionally the impact of, having children, separated families, blended families,
I think one of the things that people forget is that, I know that nature, says that you know what to do when you have a child, but I know many mums who've said it wasn't that easy when it happened.
No. And I think that's the thing. We forget, we do a lot of the practical stuff as professionals. But when you hold that baby in your arms, there's who knows what you're going to feel, as prepared as you think you are. And no one really coaches that. No one really coaches that emotional. And, you said earlier, the media will say, oh, you should feel this way. And if you don't feel this way, then it's this, and it's all put into little boxes. And being human, although we're very similar but we're really unique. So, and then obviously your child develops and your child grows, and they start moving, they start talking, they start having their own personality. And sometimes that can be very challenging if you're not prepared for all those changes.
Yeah, no, definitely. And as you just said, it is becoming more and more common to have a reconstituted family, because most people split up. Often we have kids, but there's still kind of a step-parent stigma. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
I think it's, it sort of, it feels like, for some parents, it's like, well, is it selfish for me now to think of myself and want a relationship? There's sometimes on both sides, it's not knowing what role they have. And if you just think about all the stories that we were brought up with about step parents, they were, envious and jealous, and the evil stepmother. And
I think if you just think, is it Snow White?
Yeah.
Where the stepmom is obviously evil and nasty and a witch and everything else.
Yeah, and so it's sort of, and you know, there's a lot of emotions around that. And sometimes it's about, and I know for some families, it's about admitting that actually something wasn't working and not wanting to use the word, but, you know, parents have used this, you know, look, I failed in my last relationship and people are going to know that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know some step parents, it's sort of families coming together, maybe, you know, there's an expectation there's going to be a period of time between relationships, and we can fall into the difficult sort of category of sometimes it might seem very quick,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll probably talk about that, and then other times it's left too late, and children aren't silly, they know something's happening.
Yeah.
So, you know, and if you're not talking about it, or, you know, you're too embarrassed to say, well, actually, yes, I'm sort of seeing someone, or I'm, you know, I'm also human and I want that companionship.
So in your experience, sorry, because of something you just
Yeah.
said, when is a good time to introduce the kids to your new partner?
Well, textbook says 12 months.
Okay.
Textbook. The difficulty is, what I find is, when parents meet a new partner, quite often, if they introduce them to the children too quickly, they haven't formed a relationship. So they're not quite sure what that relationship is. And there is a danger sometimes of introducing partners too early, it not working out, and you realize, actually, you know, and then the child feeling all those emotions, and
because maybe they quite like the person too.
Yeah, you know, and then there's another loss for that child.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that I found at the same time, on the, you know, the other side of the coin, so to speak, is that some of the people who have kids and who want to have a new partner, or, you know, not that they want, they met someone, shall we say, and then the logistics, if both of kids, become quickly very complicated if they are to see each other.
Yeah. It is complicated, and the thing is, it's not about hiding that. And also, you know, we have to be quite savvy here. You know, I've worked for local authority, so I know that there are some pitfalls and dangers with new partners on both sides, male and female. You know, people don't like to talk about those sort of things because it feels icky. But you know, we've got a law called Clare's Law.
Yeah.
And that was really, you know, around knowing your partner. And it's not I don't know, some people go, but it's like, you know, you're sort of peeking into their past or private investigating. But actually, you know, it's really important that you value, actually, at the end of the day, what do I really know about my partner?
No, exactly, because, you know, you also have a duty of care to protect your kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
And talking of which, I found a quote in The Guardian which says, "We're not supposed to unconditionally love our partner's parents, so why should their offspring be a different matter?"
Yeah.
And yeah, it is very true indeed. So what happens if one of the partners doesn't like the other person's kids?
And that happens because, and you know, and I sometimes actually have to say to parents, look, and step parents, you're the grown up here.
Yeah.
And if you have these expectations, you know, it's going to be difficult, because sometimes you don't like everybody, you know. Right. Not being funny, sometimes you don't like your own kids, you know. Doesn't necessarily, you know, you might not like what they're doing, but it's about building a relationship.
Yeah, definitely.
You have to get on with people, whether, you know, you think about work environment or every day, there's people that you might not really like, but you have to.
You've got to get on with it, yeah. And have you found that, you know, in your experience, it can destroy a relationship? And if so, how can it be prevented?
I think what can happen is there can be a lot of resentment. There can be a lot of resentment on the partner coming into the relationship. There can be a lot of resentment on the parent, and and obviously depending on the situation of how, the relationship with the mother or father, of the child, because children are incredibly loyal to their parents, even though they might verbally, push back, or they might decide that they're just going to rebel. They are very loyal to their parents. So if they have quite a strong relationship with the parent, it can be like, well, I don't want anyone to sort of, come in and try and be my mum or try and be my dad. And children can become quite resentful of the time that their parent, their mum,
depends on that other person.
Yeah, because it's actually, well, and I know it's sort of like, well, I've had you on my own for, I don't know, 2 years or 6 months or 5 years, and all of a sudden I've got to share you. And children don't ask for this. Children don't ask. So I would say one of the biggest things you can do is have communication, and talk to your children about what's happening. And as a step parent, if you're coming into a family, not coming in as a step parent, not coming in as going, well, I'm going to parent because actually I'm the adult, and I'm going to, and and people do it because of all that emotion. There's a lot of fear going on,
But at the same time, should that parenting element actually be shared? Because if you're going to, let's say, move in or whatever, and the child does not do right, this thing needs to be told, regardless of the fact that, you're not my mum, you're not my dad. They're still an adult, and therefore, for instance, let's just say the person said, "I do your homework. You're not my mum. You don't tell me what to do." But in the next breath, you could say, "No, I'm not your mum, but you're still going to have to do your homework regardless of you being your mum or not. So you do it." And
I think that's where communication comes in. It's having that conversation with each other, the two sort of adults in the situation, the two parents, and saying, look, what is my role in this? Because you can become, as a parent, you become quite defensive of your children. And especially if you feel the other person's being unfair. And then you can have that conflict, and if you're doing it in front of the children, they're confused, because children they need to feel safe. They need to feel safe, but also they are children, so they will look at, this is what I want, and quite selfishly, it doesn't matter who's in the way, they're going to get what they want. That's part of being a child.
You're going to try your hardest.
They're going to try their hardest, and every win will be, okay, I'm closer to this. Children are like, it's like buying the lottery ticket with children. If they can do it once, it's like, whoa, so how far can I push it before I do it again? And you're not my mum and you're not my dad is used so often.
Can imagine.
Years ago, I think it was one of the soap operas, there was this big thing, you're not my mum, sort of thing, and it's about having that conversation. But it's really difficult if you're in the throes of a new relationship and then you bring in the family to try and have those conversations. And that's why I say, give it a little bit of time, find out where you are in that relationship, have those conversations, and when you talk about bringing two families together, if both partners have children, and what you were saying was right, those children aren't automatically going to get on. Depending on where, what the sort of, I don't know, sort of
the dynamics of a family. If you just say that both have two kids, it means at that time, there's 40, I mean, I've seen situations where it's 46 in the house on top of a parent. That makes it difficult even to go out, because we don't all fit in a car, for instance.
Yeah. And especially if some of the children don't live full time with the parents, because they're coming into a home where you've got, children that already got their own rooms, their own routine, and then all of a sudden they're having to share. But then you've got the other child being resentful, thinking, well, I'm part of this family as well, But, and I always say to adults, think about it. If someone came into your house that you didn't really know and started changing the channel on the TV or picking up your game or, you know, just touching your stuff, you'd be going, excuse me.
Yeah.
And you would have all those feelings. And that's why I think it's really important to do stuff on neutral ground as well when you're first bringing that together, you know, go out neutrally where it's new to everybody, or it's the park, or, you know, it's somewhere where one person hasn't got that sense of this is mine.
And I think the other thing as well is, as you just said, for instance, if, let's say, you know, a couple of kids go and visit the dad at the weekend or whatever, they also don't want to feel like a guest, because otherwise the bonding's not going to happen, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and it's sort of, it then just puts a bigger wedge. It then brings resentment. You know, as I've said, we all have this innate sense of it's not fair. You know, and as adults, if we don't understand where that emotion is coming from, and most of the time with children, it's a sense of loss, it's a sense of, you know, fear, and it's a sense, and that normally comes from sadness, and we don't very often equate the, you know, the aggression and the moodiness and the I'm not going to do this, or just straight out with younger children, full-blown tantrums. We don't look at that and go, oh, it's sadness, or, you know, they're feeling that sense of loss of how it was. And you mentioned, I've spoken to a lot of adults who said they did their best to push the person that was coming into their family away, because they did not want that person to sort of take away, you know, the dream and the hope that their parent would come back. And I was there. I was, you know.
And I mean, the story that I shared with you before we started this, for the benefit of everybody else, it was someone I worked with, and she was 17, but the dad went when she was 4. And when the new person was introduced, she kind of like didn't want him there, because in her head, if he was there, her dad could never come back. And actually, you know, he was never going to come back because of the circumstances that, you know, that were. But in her head, if that person went, then it meant there was a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, and I've seen it time and time again, and just talking to adults. And I was talking to an adult the other day that said, and they adore their stepfather and they have a great relationship, but they said, I was awful. I was really horrible because I did not want them there. And, you know, and I think if you've also got that sense of if the relationship with, you know, the parent that has left or is not still in the family is not good, there's a sense of abandonment. There's a sense of, well, everyone's going to leave me anyway, so why should I get to know you? And, you know, going back to what I said about if you introduce someone too quickly and the relationship doesn't work, and if you're doing that, you know, and it's this isn't sort of about saying a judgment of never having relationships, but actually if you're doing that a lot, in that child's eyes, it's like, well, people come and go, why should I invest in a relationship when actually are they going to be around in 3 months?
Yeah, no, this is it. And I think, you know, we were talking earlier on, and one of the things that comes up the most is unfairness. Obviously, unfairness is something that, you know, it's a perception a lot of the time. My sense of being unfair would be different to yours, to someone else, to the neighbour, to whatever. So what do you do about that? And, you know, especially if there was a major rift, for instance, between 2 step kids, how do you deal with that?
I think you have to realise that there's no magic wand, and you're not going to make people become the best of friends but, you know, it's about thinking, okay, so we need to get them together. We need to sort of actually say at some point, we can't go on like this, you know, and sort of get that communication going. I know I use that a lot, but it's about being open.
I think, you know, communication removes the element of assumptions.
Yes.
You know, if someone knows something, they don't have to guess. They don't have to see the worst case scenario. They don't have to, you know, they need to know where they stand. It's not knowing that's far worse in any, you know, situation, really.
Absolutely. You know, how often have you, you know, you and I know I have, where I've built a story in my mind about someone,
Oh, good, yeah.
you know, because they've said something, or I've seen something, or I've heard something. And then when you have that conversation, they go, no, that's not what I meant, or that's not how I feel. And you can assume how someone's feeling, but actually you never quite know.
Mm.
So, you know, you can assume, well, you hate each other. And actually that, you know, the child might say, well, actually, I think they're all right, but they just annoy me a little bit. Or, you know, and in areas where you can live in a city, but the world is quite small.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a very small world. And I've known families where the children go to the same school.
Yeah.
But the kids don't necessarily mix with the same groups.
Yeah.
You know, so there's all that dynamics. And it's just, it's sort of, you know, expecting them to get on, expecting them to understand, when quite often I find the adults haven't had that conversation. They've just gone along with, oh yeah, well, we get on all right, and okay, let's bring our family together, and you know, and sometimes it's about going, well, yeah, this is unfair, but this is how it is. These are, you know, this is, it's not going to change. This is, you know, as you know, the relationship, this is how we feel, this is what we are not going to put up with.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, there are great organizations out there for, you know, for families. Family Lives is a great charity. They have a brilliant website, and they have Parent TV. And, you know, so they have a lot, because quite often it's not about talking to somebody, and they have a you know, a helpline that you can pick up and ring. But sometimes it's just about, oh, you know, having a look at something and thinking, do you know what? This is not just us. This is happening. And, you know, and as I said, if we don't understand our own triggers, and we don't understand what's going on for us, how can we then think about that? You know, I talk about icebergs, and, you know, quite often you'll see all this behavior, adults, children, but you never know what's going on underneath. But if you can stop and go, well, hang on a minute, you know I'm getting really ratty with my partner because homework's not important to me. So I've never put it, you know, a rule in place that they have to do their homework. But I haven't had that conversation with my partner. It's not going to be great doing that in front of the child.
No, definitely not. So what would you say?
You know, parenting is, we all have different styles of parenting, and if you've got two parents that have totally different styles, it can be really challenging.
Yeah. And what would you say are common mistakes that parents make, like this, for instance?
I think the common mistake is thinking your way's the only way. I think the common mistake is parents don't like to compromise.
Yeah. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it's hard enough in a normal relationship at the best of time anyway. When both your children, your flesh, as it were, you know, is involved, it becomes more difficult.
Yeah. Because that emotional, you know, I can, when I was working for authority, running groups, doing one-to-one with parents, and even now, you know, I'm not emotionally attached to the child. So I can sit back and I can do an observation, or I can say, you know, have you tried this? This might work. But if a parent is emotionally
involved,
looking at the child, yeah, and quite often, let's be honest, you know, you look at children to provide you with that sense of love, and it's not their job, and that's really hard. And they're doing something that, you know, you think, oh, well, if I put this in place, they're not going to love me. And, you know, every child will tell a parent, not just step parents, I hate you. At some point in their life, you know, they will say that. And normally what happens is you either have this hurt because it's like, oh, but I want you to love me, and you will then indulge them,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll go, okay, you can have anything you want, or you will withdraw yourself and saying, well, I'm not going to be hurt again. And that's when you're emotionally attached to your child. So think about someone coming in, a step parent, where they haven't got the emotional attachment. It's going to be even harder.
Yeah.
And I, you know, it's about it's taking a step back, which we don't do really. We don't take that step back and go, okay, so, you know, I have power over my thoughts. You know, I can hear my thoughts, which means that I can change my thoughts. And if I take a step back and just think, okay, well, what's going on here? Is that, you know, I say to parents, just stop for 5 seconds, take a breath and think, what is going on here? Because in the moment, you get very drawn into that reacting.
Yeah, no, definitely. And do you think there's some expectations from all sides, as it were?
Yeah, I think sometimes, you know, there can be this expectation that everyone's going to get on.
Mm-hmm.
There can be an expectation that your relationship will be fine because, you know, especially if you've been in a relationship and had children, both sides, and you think, well, I've done this, you know.
We know what we're doing, sort of thing.
Yeah, there can also be expectations, I think, in the relationship between the two parents, that oh, well, we you know, having time for ourselves is selfish. And I think when we talked about, you know, some of those sticking points and relationship issues, if you, even in, you know, any relationship, if you don't take time to spend together, and, you know, and
you grow apart.
Yeah, you grow apart. You know, even if it's just, okay, well, tonight all the kids are in bed, we're just going to sit down and we're going to have a pizza together, or we're going to have a glass of wine together, or, you know, it doesn't have to be, because, you know, there are issues with finance with some families. It doesn't have to be something mega. But people don't. You get very wrapped up in just doing, and not realizing that being selfish and, well, you know, taking care of yourself is not, yeah, it's not selfish. And I always say to parents, you know, how can you continually, you know, support your children, sort of be there when you're running on empty?
Yeah, no, definitely.
When you're absolutely exhausted. I know what I'm like when I'm tired. And if I don't recognize, actually, I'm tired, and communicate that, and you know what, today, kids, I'm just going to not rush around. I'm going to just sort of, you know, people have pajama days, and I think pajama days are great.
No, that's fair enough.
Today, we're just going to stay in our pajamas. We're not going out, or we're going to go for a walk. We're not, you know, I'm not going to continually be doing. And you need that in relationships as well. And I think so many people that I talk to, especially with the emotional sort of strength stuff I do, they do not have any stop and thinking time. And sometimes that's by choice, because if you stop and think, you then have to face.
Yeah.
In relationships, if you stop and think about your relationship, or stop and think, why am I not spending time with this person? You then have to admit that something's not working.
Yeah.
You know, and I think also there's with, I think the misconception and the myth is, oh, well, they can walk away.
And that fear of being left alone again.
Yeah, and I know stepfathers who have gone into families and built a relationship with the children and been really, you know, a big part of their life. And then that relationship has broken down. And it's like, well, what's my role now? I'm not their biological father.
Yeah.
But I still want to have, you know, I still want to see them. I still want to be part of their lives.
And the mum can very, very easily stop that from happening.
Absolutely. You know, the other parent, you know, say it's a dad who, you know, their partner has decided they're in a relationship, they can then become very sort of, confused about, so what's going on here? And that, the child will come, oh, we did this with so-and-so today, and so-and-so was so great. So it can then make you fear that your child's going to like their step-parent
more than you.
So there's just like this minefield. And it's understanding that, and it's thinking about it. But in our busy world, people don't.
No, that's a shame. And I've got to say, unfortunately, we're getting to the end of our time, but I think the one thing to leave people with is this, take time out to think about things instead of letting life happen to you, shall we say. Kari,
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely talking to you. And if you enjoyed the show, then please subscribe, leave us a review, but more importantly, come back for the next episode. Thank you.